Having been released all the way back in 2003, Danny Boyle's and Alex Garland's 28 Days Later revolutionized the zombie genre by popularizing pathogenic, super sprinting zombies with insanely fast turning times. I mean, just think about it. Snyder's Dawn of the Dead had sprinters born from a supernatural pathogen. Left 4 Dead was famously influenced by the rage infected of 28 Days Later. And even The Walking Dead's Walker Apocalypse is brought about by a virus. The film even went on to redefine, in the eyes of many fans of the undead genre, the actual definition of what a zombie could be, with people still to this day being upset with the overall zombie community's acceptance of the living infected. I mean, let's just ignore how Romero's zombies were a total redefinition of the OG Asian zombie, or how Romero's zombies were initially known to be ghouls. Yes, what I'm saying here is that you're pretty stupid for not getting with the times, but I digress. Y'all probably get the gist by now. 28 Days Later was a hugely impactful cinematic masterpiece that managed to resurrect the undead genre. And in this film, we get to follow the adventures of Jim and friends, who, by the way, are some of the smoothest brained morons ever showcased on the silver screen. That's right, I said it, and I'm gonna prove it to you with this thought experiment. Being, what if Jim and friends weren't complete imbeciles? What if we just granted them a gracious boost in intelligence? How would having a higher IQ impact the story? I'm not talking about giving them insight into future events. I'm not talking about taking advantage of hindsight. I'm talking about Jim and pals making smarter decisions based on what he and his crew already knew. Trust when I say this specific change will significantly alter the plot of the movie, to the point where it's not only boring but also profoundly shorter. But before we delve into the details of this what if video, allow me to ask you for a very quick favor. Apparently, most of you viewing my content regularly aren't subscribed. And did you know that that very fact makes me cry myself to sleep every night? If you haven't yet, please consider smashing that subscribe button. It really helps the channel with the algorithm gods, and as such allows me to continue to entertain you. Now with that shameless plug out of the way, let's get the ball rolling on this thought experiment by beginning our story not at the lab or the hospital, but rather when Jim is rescued by Selena and Mark. Now, why start here, you might ask? Well, it's because it'd be more interesting, plus it really helps to highlight the negative IQ of our main cast. That being said, when Jim, Selena, and Mark are laying low in an underground London sweet shop, both Selena and Mark explain to Jim what has happened to the world around them while Jim was taking a nap at the hospital. They also explain to Jim what the rage virus does to people. They even give him some pointers on how to survive. But interestingly enough, these two lame brains omit some crucial bits of information. Specifically the bit about how the infected are attracted to noise and light sources. You know, the sort of intel you'd want the new recruit to understand so that he doesn't get all of y'all killed. Funnily enough, this unfortunate omission of facts leads directly to the attack we see at Jim's parents' house, when Jim unknowingly attracts the attention of a nearby group of infected. This assault also leads directly to the untimely death of Mark. Had the Greenhorn understood not to make noise or walk around with a light source next to windows, the group would have never been one man down. Hence, by altering this tiny portion of the timeline, we dramatically change the rest of the story. But let's just, for the sake of keeping things interesting, allow events to play out as they did in the canon timeline. The infected break into the house and both Selena and Mark end up dealing with the problem, while Jim lays on the ground like a useless potato. Selena then notices that Mark is cut and that he has infected blood and his blood on his arm. He's clearly wiping blood off of his open wound as well. She looks at him and then, based on the look on his face, kills him on the spot, while then going on to spare Jim, who literally had the same fucking look on his face as Mark. I'ma just be real with y'all. This was a fantastically stupid thing to do. All she had to do was tell Mark to lock himself in the nearest room. The infected can't open doors, and clearly Selena has shown to be capable of killing one in close quarters during the ISO. Killing Mark on the spot, all because of some idiotic hunch, was just not smart. If Mark was infected, he'd be locked in a room. If he turned before locking himself into a room, he'd show clear symptoms we know Selena is familiar with. Remember, she could instantly tell when Frank was actually turning, later on in the film. As soon as the symptoms were clear, she could have killed Mark rather easily. The dude just wasn't a threat. And here's the kicker. If he really wasn't infected, she just fucked her group's odds of survival by killing an experienced survivor. As such, the intelligent course of action would have been just to wait a few more seconds. The outcome would have ultimately either been the same as the canonical timeline, or we would have seen Mark's story continue beyond the confines of that house. Also, for those of you who will quote the script of the movie directly, you can easily argue that the narrative implies that Mark is infected, but an implication is not a confirmation. Here's a blunt fact for y'all to consider, especially if your reading comprehension sucks ass. This script does not state in any way that infected blood actually entered Mark's wound. It merely confirms that infected blood was near the cut, in the same manner that infected blood was near Jim's eyes and mouth. The script does not confirm that Mark is infected. It does not indicate that he was showing any symptoms. It merely leaves us with an ambiguous state of affairs, which makes total sense because the ambiguity of this scene is what makes it hit so damn hard. So remember folks, before you quote a script, please learn how to read. Be that as it may, let's just assume Mark survives due to him either not being infected or Jim not causing the raid on his own home. Eventually, the trio of survivors comes across Frank's apartment when they see the idiot broadcasting his location to the entirety of the London metropolitan area. Now let's just say everything pans out as it did in the canon timeline. Frank lets them in, he explains to the group his problem of water scarcity due to a lack of rainfall, and everyone reluctantly agrees to head to the military outpost mentioned in the radio broadcast picked up by Frank's crank radio. I mean, I personally wouldn't go on a multi-day trip to some random-ass military base for the same exact reasons Selena outlined in the film, but let's just run with it anyway. Hence, the story proceeds as is with the inclusion of Mark. Then we arrive at the tunnel. Look, I'm gonna be real with y'all. Frank was a moron for driving through that choke point. Jim was absolutely right when he told the group to take the indirect route that was actually in daylight. Had Frank followed Jim's advice, they never would have had a close brush with the infected and the car would be in better condition. After this incident, the group finds a supermarket which was completely intact, with the fucking power still running. This right here would have been the proper place to set up camp. Barricade the storefront, keep quiet, and just lay low on a treasure trove of food and water. There was enough shit in that store to comfortably last the team, at minimum, 2 weeks. And that's without any rationing. Why even bother risking a journey to some unknown military base when you've got it made with the market? Frank was bitching about water, well, now he can have some. They could always just make the trip later, after loading up the car with some non-perishables and potable water. They're not in a rush, the infected aren't besieging their location. They also know from experience that the infected are very much alive and are not some supernatural undead monstrosities. At some point, intelligent people should be able to connect the dots, in the same way Major West did. The infected will eventually starve or die of dehydration. We can just wait these bloody pricks out. And if they're willing to risk waiting through the rest of the multi-story structure, really only sticking to the hallways and ignoring any other units, they could rather easily set up a rain collection system on the roof, thus extending their potential longevity to at least 3 weeks. And considering that Jim wakes up on day 28 or week 4, and the infected all starved by week 5, setting up camp inside the market would have kept everyone alive past the expiration date of the infected, at which point general survival would be the goal from week 5 until week 11, which is when the American-led NATO force arrives in London. Hence, the story ends with literally no one dying. And in a worst-case scenario, the crew could have easily fallen back to Frank's apartment with a trunk full of non-perishable food and potable water, a location they know to be both nearby and also secure. So yeah, that's really where the film ends if our survivors were actually intelligent. Anyways, if you like this sort of content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Click the bell as well, that way you may be notified when I publish a new video. And also remember that you may opine anytime if you feel so inclined down in the comment section. I'm Captain Gold, and I hope to see you in my next Gold Standard video.